The Last Flight Home, based on actual events. Written and read by Rebecca Prophet. Elder Carson carefully picked up his worn book of scriptures and leather-bound journal and placed them on top of the hand-woven mat inside his suitcase. His trusty machete was wrapped in a tie-dyed lava underneath his clothes where it would stay protected for the journey. Elder Carson's insides were a mess of emotions. He was excited to see his family again, yet devastated to have been so abruptly sent home. Elder Carson had been serving as a missionary in the South Pacific country of Kiribati. He spent most of his days swinging a machete with his companion as they hiked through the tropical jungle to teach people about Jesus Christ. He loved the people and they loved him. As a missionary, they followed a code of conduct. They called everyone they met brother and sister, and they were strictly forbidden from going swimming. The not swimming part was hard, however, it couldn't keep them from visiting the ocean each night. They often had to catch their own dinner, and so once teaching and serving was done, they'd spend an hour at the beach letting the waves and the sand roll over their feet. The machetes they carried by their sides came in handy when they needed to chop a stalk of bananas down or crack open a fresh coconut. Elder Carson kicked away a cockroach with his sandals as he looked over at Elder Lanoa, who was also dutifully packing his bags. Elder Carson smiled to himself as he remembered when they had first been assigned as companions. They didn't get along very well, and he had dreaded spending 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with the boisterous Elder Lanoa. But somehow, as the months passed, they grew to love each other, and before long they felt more like brothers than they did missionary companions. Saying goodbye to Elder Lanoa would be the most difficult goodbye of all. In just a few hours, they would both board the same flight. The flight would stop in Fiji, where Elder Lanoa would leave for home, and then continue on to Salt Lake City, where Elder Carson lived. It was unlikely that they would ever see one another again. Elder Carson zipped up his bag and hefted it up onto the table. It was all that he would be bringing home from his time here on the island. He breathed in the musty, moist smell deep into his nose and called out to his companion. It was frustrating having to leave early, but since COVID-19 had now officially visited almost every country on Earth, it was mandatory that missionaries from all over the world get home as quickly as possible. And the approaching tropical cyclone made the air heavy and the trip home even more urgent. The last 7 flights that the 2 elders were supposed to take out of the country had been canceled, and eventually their church chartered its own plane to pick up the missionaries and bring them home. "Elder, are you ready?" called out Elder Carson. Elder Lanoa had a smile that made everyone feel safe. "Yes, Carson, I'm ready." When the elders arrived at the airport early that morning, it was already full of young men and young women in shirts and ties, dusty sandals, traditional lei necklaces and skirts, and worn-out backpacks. Besides a very small group of other people, there really wasn't anyone else there. Missionaries from Fiji, Tonga, Kiribati, and the Marshall Islands were all scrambling to take their flights home. As they began to line up to go through security, an announcement came over the loudspeaker. Although this flight has been chartered by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to bring their missionaries home, we have a group of 11 high-ranking government officials who are anxious to return home to their families as well. The flight itself is not full, but we have reached our maximum capacity for weight. Elder Carson turned to look at the group of Fijians. He wondered at their expensive clothes and curious stares. Only a few minutes passed before Elder Lanoa, in typical island fashion, boomed out, "So, what should we do?" Startled to hear someone's voice above the murmur, the flight attendant picked up the microphone again. "The government of Fiji requires that all remaining missionaries must leave their bags behind. Leaving this weight behind will allow the additional passengers to board the flight." Without warning, there was an explosion of confused chatter. They had already been asked to go home early, and as if that sacrifice was not enough, they were now being forced to leave without their belongings? Elders and sisters began talking to one another, a few of them almost in tears. "Where will our bags go?" one sister cried out. "Will we ever see them again?" asked another. It was soon established that the bags would be hastily returned to the senior missionaries, Elder and Sister Brock's Kiribati flat for temporary storage. Nobody knew if or when they would be returned. Elder Lanoa didn't seem to be fazed by the sudden change of plans, as he made everyone smile when he shouted out with, "Keep my old bag! I didn't want to bring that old luggage home anyways!" The confident-looking group of government officials began to look embarrassed as it became clear what the missionaries were being told to sacrifice and how gracefully they were taking the demands. The time for boarding came and went several times, and it was close to 10 p.m. before the missionaries, as well as the government officials, finally boarded the flight. Elder Carson tried to shake the uneasy feeling of resentment from his heart. The abruptness and surprising insecurity of everything that had happened in the last few weeks was difficult to process. Would this be the end of his mission? Would he be assigned somewhere else after returning home? Would he ever see his bags again? Would they make it safely through the storm? The questions relentlessly tortured his tired mind. As they flew towards Fiji, Elder Carson sat with his headphones as he tried to distract himself with some hymns on his cell phone. At this moment, he felt himself holding on to frustration and anger as it grew inside him. Anger towards COVID-19, anger towards the approaching storm, anger towards the 11 men whose seats were just rows in front of him and whose presence made it so he couldn't bring his bags home. As the plane continued his journey, Elder Carson begged God to take away the feelings he was having and replace them with the peace and the joy that he had so often felt while serving as a missionary. When the plane stopped in Fiji and the 11 government officials got up to leave, Elder Carson heard himself wishing them good riddance under his breath, and for the first time in hours, he almost felt some relief. But then, with a jolt of pain, he instantly realized that their departure also meant it was time to say goodbye to Elder Lanoa. Elder Carson watched his fun-loving, carefree companion make his way down the crowded exit, disappearing amongst a sea of departing missionaries dressed alike. It was strange how one experience could cause such a high and low of emotions. Sacrifice was nothing new to Elder Carson. His entire mission was filled with sacrifice. After all, that was all part of what it meant to spend your life in the service of others. Endless hours teaching English lessons, cultivating wild gardens in the jungle, learning a new language, digging wells, volunteering at the local schools, and of course, teaching people about Jesus Christ had been both exhausting and soul-stretchingly satisfying. But it was in that moment of seeing the departing missionaries and the departing government officials, who, from here, now all looked the same, that Elder Carson had an epiphany. This life was too short to allow hatred and anger to flourish. And with extraordinary good people like Elder Lanoa returning home to his family with nothing but joy in his heart, Elder Carson understood. They really were all brothers and sisters. They were all returning home with no material possessions. They all had families who had probably been desperately praying and pleading for the safe return of their loved ones. Despite their differences before God, they were all equal. Elder Carson thought back to takeoff, how the flight crew, who had started out as strangers, had allowed them to offer a prayer for safety over the loudspeaker, and how the whole plane had burst into song as they waited for a break in the storm to depart. He thought about the hours they had spent together in the airport since it was announced that they had to leave their bags, and how, even with the nearly suffocating heat, the room had filled with the sounds of music as missionaries facing extraordinary circumstances turned an ordinary airport into a sanctuary. Although it was not without sacrifice, within 48 hours of leaving Kiribati, every missionary left on the island had arrived safely to their family on the last flight home.